Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. The show is produced and broadcast from Portland, Oregon, USA. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about. We'll be talking about the Bull Run water system and a lot of other stuff about that with my guest, Floyd Jones. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
How are you feeling right now?
Great.
You're not nervous?
Not particularly.
Well, why is it my guests are always really relaxed? And I'm so nervous I can't even talk.
Yeah, you're a great host, so I'm sure that's why.
Thank you, yeah. So, as you know, the show goes in two major parts. The first part is what I call the bio part, where I talk to you about who you are so the viewers can identify with some aspects of your personality and where you were born, that kind of stuff. And then the second half of the show, it sounds like you got so much to talk about that we'll have a longer half hour than usual because Bull Run water system is so important to talk about. So, shall we start?
Yes.
Who are you segment. If I were to ask your best friend, who is Floyd? What would your best friend say? Be your best friend. Floyd is what?
Well, Floyd's a native Portlander who is a very thoughtful person who cares about the community and for a very long time has been involved in activism, particularly related to protecting our Bull Run water system. Mm-hmm. She cares a lot about justice and fairness and equality and wanting to work towards a better life for all Portlanders.
How did you get to be that way?
Well, I think a lot of our background, relates to our education. I grew up in Portland. I went to a Catholic grade school, so I have background in in religious ethics and morality and that sort of thing, and our parenting.
In how many positive feeling experiences, because I was a Catholic kid. I was an altar boy for years, so I know what you're talking about. Are you a practicing Catholic nowadays?
I'm probably a typical practicing Catholic, yes.
You have to be a radical like you are.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you were born in Portland, and I'm not supposed to ask you when because you don't ask a woman her age.
Right, but I've been here a long time, and my family's actually been here. Generations of my family have been here since 1900, which, Bull Run was created in about 1895. So we've been drinking Bull Run water for generations, for over 100 years.
And it hasn't affected you?
It's been great water.
Why were you born?
Well, for a lot of reasons, I think, because my parents wanted a child. And
any deep philosophical reasons or spiritual reasons that you were born?
Well, I think everyone has a lot of different purposes in life.
Yeah.
And, clearly if you have faith, it's to serve the Lord. That's one main purpose in being born.
Mm-hmm. All right. And you say a few more words about your cultural heritage, or you're just plain old American white bread?
Well, one side of my family is Italian, so Italian Americans. And by the way, Italians were very instrumental in building Bull Run. And the other side, yes, is a mix, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I grew up with the Italian side of my family.
Okay. And you talked about your religious preference, but you're sort of a lapsed Catholic.
I wouldn't say lapsed, but...
I'm an agnostic, a skeptic, perhaps even an atheist, considering I was born as a conservative Catholic kid in New Orleans. So that's where I am religious nowadays. I think it's important to talk to a person about their religious orientation because sometimes their opinions and views on issues of political importance to me are influenced strongly by a person's religious preference. And that's why I ask those kinds of questions sometimes. And don't forget, if I ask you a question that you don't want to answer, or it's useless, well, I say that's useless or whatever, so we'll keep going on.
Right.
And how about your formal education?
Well, as I said, I went to a Catholic grade school, I went to a public high school, and then 4 years in Eugene. I graduated from the University of Oregon at a school that's now defunct, but it was a community service and public affairs program, a Bachelor of Arts.
Did you move beyond that in formal education, or was that enough?
No, that was it, and then got right to work.
And what kind of work did you get right to?
I was a probation officer, a parole and probation officer for 25 years.
25 years?
Yeah, that was a good career, a difficult career at times, but...
I bet you've got some stories, huh?
Oh, there are lots of stories.
When are you going to write your memoirs?
Actually, if I write, I think it will be on Bull Run. Yeah.
How about other education, other than your formal education in schools and like that? Anything come to mind when you ask that question?
No, life is an education, I think.
Yeah.
All of your relationships and activities, and this has been quite an education working on this issue.
How long are you going to keep working at it?
Well, I've been working at it for 16 years.
Whoa, man.
Yeah.
Didn't you get bored?
No, I didn't get bored. I got involved back in 2001 or 2 because the Water Bureau was planning then to demolish historic reservoirs at Mount Tabor Park in southeast Portland, and doing so without any public involvement process and without really any reasonable explanation. And we formed a group and really started doing research. That was a real significant factor in learning more about our Bull Run system. I think anyone who's lived in Portland or lived in the region has always appreciated what great tasting water we have here, but I don't think a lot of people know much about Water Bureau history or about changes that the Water Bureau has proposed to our system.
It's you versus the Water Board.
Well, there have been a lot of organizations that have been working to protect Bull Run for many, many years.
And when you tell us more about Bull Run, people will appreciate a little more what you're talking about, or why you have this love affair with Bull Run water, so to speak.
Yes.
I gotta watch my language here, love affair. Oh, okay. If I've been in my travels, I've tasted water from other areas of the country and even other countries sometimes, and I can appreciate how delicious the water is here.
It is. It's great. And I think there are other places in the country where you'll go and you will drink water from the tap and enjoy it. They're almost all unfiltered water systems. New York, San Francisco, Seattle, Boston. Those are the places where water is great from the tap because you don't get a lot of chemicals in those cities. People think filtration takes things out of the water, but what it actually does is inserts chemicals into our water.
Chemicals, wow. So, other than being a probation officer, did you have any other careers or professions or jobs?
Well, that's a pretty full-time job.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not an 8 to 5 job. So that's going to occupy your life in terms of a career.
So, all right, and you've been retired from being a probation officer?
Yes.
For how long?
Well, for a number of years.
Okay.
Retired or no longer working there. Yeah, that was a long enough career. I think, during the first 10 years, you really get a sense of all of the different issues and problems. And so if you manage to last for 25 years, like being a police officer or anyone in that related field, that's a pretty long career.
Do you have a partner, a husband, a boyfriend, a girlfriend? I got to cover all the bases.
Oh. Those are all very personal questions. I like to not talk about those.
Okay. Children or grandchildren, you want to talk about those or not?
No.
Political persuasion, do you see yourself as left, right, or center, or what?
Oh, well, I'm a lifetime Democrat, but, you know, on some things I'm fiscally, like, you know, fiscal issues, I'm a little bit more conservative, but obviously on social issues, pretty much left-leaning.
I'm not sure anymore what that means. I'm a Democrat, because I remember times when we got Sessions nowadays was a firm supporter of Trump, and he was a Democrat. Never mind, I'm getting too far afield here. But I see myself as an independent or democratic socialist, if I may. Bernie is one of my heroes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think most of us here in Oregon supported Bernie in the primary, anyway.
Any memberships in political, social, or civic organizations worth mentioning, or is that personal?
Well, you know.
You don't care to mention them?
Not particularly, no.
Okay. So, any persons from the past or alive today that you particularly like or look up to?
You know, I can't say I have any particular heroes in, you know, in the public sphere. I mean, there are a lot of people that are active in Portland that I admire.
Are you interested in coming across as neutral in my questions I'm asking you? And that's okay if that's what you want to do. Okay. Any persons alive today or from the past that you particularly dislike or disliked?
Well.
Okay, that's enough questions,
Yeah.
and because we're going to leave you just as you are, and I've got as much out of you as I can get. And sometimes I put my hat on. I'm a retired clinical psychologist, and I blur the line because I find I'm asking you questions that I'd be asking a patient rather than a citizen like me. And you know I'm a confirmed leftist, radical, like that. All right, so let's take an early break so we'll have plenty enough time to talk about Bull Run water. Shall we take a break early, Mr. E? Beautiful. Okay, we're back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like my friend Floyd here. And we will talk about Bull Run water and other related subjects in the second half of the show, but you're starting kind of early because there's so much she's going to talk about, and I got to look at my prompting questions that I got from her, and then we'll start. And this email to me, you said, I understand that the Portland Water Bureau fast-tracked plans this summer, 2017, to monumentally change Portland's Bull Run water system. What are their plans, and why is this of great concern? You want to take off?
Yes. So you may have heard this spring that the Water Bureau announced that they had been detecting this microorganism, this parasite called Cryptosporidium. It was in all the media. They followed all of the press releases from the Water Bureau, but what was never disclosed was that when they had these detects, they were essentially harmless. You know, most Cryptosporidium parasites are harmless. Most species of Cryptosporidium are harmless. And at the time, you heard our commissioners, City Commissioner Nick Fish, say it'll be a long time before we have any discussions about building any treatment plants or taking any action.
I'm going to interrupt you now.
Yeah.
Perhaps we should go back a little further and talk a little more about the Portland water system and water systems, anything to give people a broader perspective about what you'll be talking about in some detail now.
Okay.
You do that.
Yes. Well, so our Bull Run water system, created in the late 1800s. It's an isolated watershed about 35 miles east of Portland, and it is the only federally protected watershed in the nation. There are no others.
I enjoyed my tour there.
Yes,
a couple years ago, yeah.
Yes. So you were able to see just how isolated and how protected it is. There's no human entry to the watershed. There are no domesticated animals in our watershed. And new protections were actually enacted through Congress in 2001. And thanks to other activists, that's why we have those protections. The little Sandy was added because of people like Regna Merritt, who used to be the director at Oregon Wild, and then Dr. Joe Miller, who's a community hero with regard to Bull Run. We have those new protections. So because we have this highly protected watershed, Bull Run, like 5 other systems, has remained an unfiltered water system. We meet all of the federal criteria for filtration avoidance, and that's a really good thing, because what it means is we've been avoiding adding all of these chemicals to our drinking water. It's pristine watershed, and it's essentially pure water. It's minimally treated. It's treated twice. There's chlorine, and then now I'm forgetting the second treatment at Lusted Hill, but it's very minimally treated.
How about water systems in other cities around the country and other water systems? I've not had any reports of serious diseases or problems, because even though their water is not as pristine as Bull Run, so.
Well, approximately 90% of other large systems actually do have filtration plants because their watersheds are not protected.
Okay.
And so there are a number of contaminants. When you open up your watershed to human activity, you're going to get a whole long list of contaminants.
Especially with fracking, huh?
Well, not necessarily related to fracking, but just related to normal human activities. If you have cities in your watershed, or you have feedlots in your watershed, you're going to end up with a whole long list of contaminants. And that's why we ended up in this situation. Is in 1993 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, there was a massive backflow of human sewage, cow sewage into their water system. And they had, by the way, a costly state-of-the-art filtration plant in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, yeah.
Yes, but people still got very sick. Many people got sick, and many people died. But you have to think about that. They had a highly unprotected watershed, and they had a filtration plant that didn't protect them.
Now I'm getting a flavor of why you're so in love with, I use that word again, with Bull Run system.
With our Bull Run water system. And the other part of our system, until very recently, that has been so great, is not only did we have this gravity-fed system, that flows downhill from Bull Run with minimal treatment, but then it came into Portland with open reservoirs. And some people might be concerned, people can throw things in the reservoirs, but the real benefit of those open reservoirs were that they release disinfection byproducts from the minimal treatment that we have, and they protected us during the days when the Water Bureau had to go to our secondary source, which is at the well field, the Columbia South Shore well field, and there's naturally occurring radon at that well field.
Yeah.
Well, with the open reservoirs, all of that radon vented before it got into your home, schools.
You said water running downhill from Bull Run. Apparently, its location, elevation-wise, facilitates it's going
gravity
downhill.
Fed.
Gravity
That's
fed.
right.
Thank you.
Yes,
yeah.
gravity fed
Yeah.
system. But then in recent years, the Water Bureau and these corporations have long wanted big projects. And so they started trying to push those, I would say about 25 years ago.
What do you got against corporations?
Well, the issue is that...
I'm going to provoke you.
Yeah, the issue here is that these corporations make their money off of big projects. They don't make their money off of maintaining the great system that we have. And so the Water Bureau's had some favored corporations, and they've had some revolving door consultants that were once Water Bureau employees. They left the Water Bureau and they went to these global engineering corporations, and then they've gotten an endless string of contract after contract after contract.
Are they friends with Trump?
I don't know that they're friends with Trump, but they're very cozy with the Water Bureau, very, very cozy.
Okay.
And so when they had no success in pushing these projects, whenever they've gone out to the public and said, we want to make some changes, we want to make these major changes, there's been a lot of pushback. I can think back, having done this now for 16 years, back in 2002 when they wanted to demolish these reservoirs up at Mount Tabor Park.
Yeah.
You know, we started...
Beautiful up there.
Yes,
oh,
yes. We rallied around and organized our group, which, you know, didn't exist prior to that time, Friends of the Reservoirs, to protect not only our open reservoirs, but to protect our entire water system. And we pushed the Water Bureau to have meetings, community meetings, you know, to talk about these changes. And as we started doing research, all of the reasons that they gave us didn't hold water. And
no pun intended.
Yeah, or pun intended. And so we were able to rally hundreds of people at meetings. And what we were faced with is oftentimes we weren't speaking with the Water Bureau, we were speaking with their consultants. They were the ones giving the presentation. And so then we started doing public records requests.
Who hired the consultants?
The Water Bureau. So they're using ratepayer dollars to pay these global engineering companies.
Are there politics involved in this?
Well, obviously, City Council approves these contracts. And, you know, in recent years, you know, the corporations have contributed to the politicians' campaigns.
That's what I'm looking for, to hear from you. Okay. So you're aware of that?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
okay, thank you.
You know, and so we just kept pushing and pushing, and, you know, they finally relented and held a massive public process, and even the people they selected to serve on the committees didn't support their projects. So that's what's happened now in recent years. They've decided we're not going to have public processes because we can't get support from the community.
Oh, how can that be? This is a democracy, isn't it?
Well, it's so easy because all they need to do is go to City Council, and City Council is happy to raise our rates because every time they raise our rates, then they get a utility license fee. That increases every time they raise our rates, and they have more money to spend on their pet projects.
So you've been digging rather deeply into this.
Oh, yes. Hundreds of, well, thousands of hours have been spent on public records requests. And that's how we know the whole history to where we've gotten today, and this monumental decision that was made during the summer. And that's done with purpose. That's done with intent. Even though it was back in March when the Water Bureau had these detects of this non-infectious crypto. And so I'm going to bring it back around to Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Of course.
So Milwaukee, Wisconsin had this event, and they attributed it all to these infectious species of Cryptosporidium. But obviously, if you have sewage flowing into your water through a filtration plant, there's more than this one parasite. There are a whole string of parasites. But it took EPA over 20 years to pass a regulation related to that incident in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
20 years.
20 years. And And unfortunately, when they were working on this regulation, they had chemical companies involved, and only one utility in the entire United States was involved in developing this regulation. You want to guess what utility that was? The Portland Water Bureau. And of course, no one in the public, no one in Portland really knew that. When the Water Bureau got involved in helping to craft this flawed from the start regulation.
And the regulation would be for what purpose?
Well, the regulation would be to address this cryptosporidium.
Okay.
And to, to deal with it, to protect, the public. Well, the Water Bureau got involved, and they terminated their internal water quality committee, which included citizens, interested citizens who'd been working to protect Bull Run. So they terminated their water quality committee, secretly was involved in crafting this regulation, which is totally flawed. All of the industry, even the water industry, the American Water Works Association Research Foundation has consistently criticized this regulation. And the reason is because the regulation doesn't distinguish between the cryptosporidium that's harmful to humans, and there are only 2 species that are, and the majority of cryptosporidium that's harmless. So that's the kind of cryptosporidium they detected in Bull Run. And you can't tell me that throughout the last 125 years, where no one has ever gotten sick from Bull Run water, and there's never been any disease in the community from Bull Run water, that there hasn't on occasion been non-infectious cryptosporidium, coming through from wildlife. Those are not the infectious species. But now the Water Bureau has been using that to say, we want to proceed with these big projects that forever change our great pure Bull Run water. So we're now on a ticking clock to eliminate pure Bull Run water and start adding all these chemicals to our water.
So then, this is your understanding of why they're doing that. I wonder what you think the real reason is that they're doing that, and we're having the situation that we're having right now to fight them, to stop them from managing Bull Run water.
Yeah.
Why is
well,
it?
This has been going on for a very long time. Like I said, these corporations have been involved for 25, 30 years. And, they receive contract after contract. And, I did research on that. I actually outlined, about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, a whole list of contracts that this same set of corporations, CH2M Hill and MWH Global, all the contracts that they received since one of the Water Bureau employees left the Water Bureau and went to these corporations. Mm-hmm. It's been just like an endless stream of contracts. And as I said, they don't make their money off of maintaining our system. So from the very beginning, like one of the first contracts they received was one to study the open reservoirs. It went on for 9 years. 9 years.
Well, they needed enough time, didn't they?
Yeah, it's insane. It was amended and extended for 9 years, and of course, money's added every time. And the public, is unaware of this. Then he received a concurrent contract to study Pell Butte Master Plan, where they were going to build a chemical filtration plant and they were going to bury tanks. I mean, on and on. Then he got a contract to help.
Somebody could make some money there.
That's right. And he got a contract to help craft this federal regulation. So the real motivation behind this.
All the angles, huh?
That's right. The motivation is they want big, fun, and glamorous build projects. That's really the motivation behind all of this. Now, they'll give you a long list now of why they want to do this. But again, when you look at this history of 125 years, and they'll say climate change now. Well, climate change isn't new, is it? It's 20, 25 years we've been talking about this. They've done modeling of the impacts of climate change on Bull Run. 20 years ago, they said climate change was going to cause water demand to skyrocket. It hasn't. It's gone, while population increased, water demand has gone down for 20 years. And one of the reasons is that we're all using more efficient appliances. And the other is this death spiral. As you keep raising our water rates, what do people do? They use less water. They conserve. So it's a death spiral now. Every year they have to increase rates because people are using less water to sustain the system. And if you really just focused on maintaining this great system that we have, you wouldn't have to increase the rates. People could enjoy using more water, you know, when it's hot, on a hot summer day, but people aren't going to do that now, are they? Because it's so expensive.
So the main concern is we're going to interfere with a pure, healthy system to do something for whatever reason that can cause some difficulties that are not existing in the pure system that goes on now.
That's right. That's right. And this filtration plant that they passed through City Council on August 2nd with no public involvement. There was none. They brought it to council.
How could they do that?
Because there are 5 council members and they sit up there and they vote and they're happy to do it while everybody's out of town in August when they know everyone's gone, no one knows this is happening. And they'd already spent $16 million on a lower cost option for addressing this federal regulation. They'd already given CH2M Hill millions of dollars to design a UV radiation plant, which we didn't support either. But if you're going to waste money on a problem that doesn't exist, are you going to waste the least amount or are you going to waste the most? So the chemical filtration plant is going to cost upwards of $300 to $500 million, $300 to $500 million for a problem that doesn't exist. And add chemicals, acrylamide, alum, aluminum, a whole lit polymers to our water. And what is it that we could do at home to eliminate that? There's nothing that we're going to be able to do. That's going to be in our water. It's going to take them many years to build this, and your water rates are going to go up and up and up further, making it unaffordable to all but the elite.
Well, if they manage the water system, then they'll be sure that it will remain pure, right? Yeah.
Well, if
it sounds like that's what their goal is. Never mind what the other motivations are.
Well, they're not going to manage it to maintain it as pure.
They're calling it managing it, aren't they?
Well, they call it managing it. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be managed.
Well, they're convincing the people in power or the authorities that it needs to be managed, and that's why it's falling apart. You guys aren't convincing them that it doesn't need the kind of managing you're talking about.
Well, this has been brought to City Council earlier. So in 2009, there was a big hearing at City Council, and we had pushed for alternative compliance. But the Water Bureau set it up. They've known all along that EPA wouldn't differentiate between these different species of this parasite called Cryptosporidium. So it was really a setup. You know, they did this massive sampling, but as we predicted, we knew eventually they would find harmless Cryptosporidium. So it's just been a setup to spend money, spend money, spend money, and eventually all the projects that this corporation outlined in their infrastructure master plan back in 2000, they'd get to build them all. And, you know,
it's a lifetime career, huh?
It is. It's a very, very sad thing. I mean, there will never be another federally protected watershed that is producing pure Bull Run water. I mean, if we could store water, I would be doing that, but water goes stale. You can't store water for more than, you know, a couple of weeks. It's going to go stale. But
when the water goes stale, what does that mean? Can you say a few more words about that? What that means?
Well, it changes the composition and the taste and the flavor of it. It's, you know, you can't endlessly store water
because there are bacteria and all sorts of other things in pure water. If it's exposed to the environment.
And just basically the taste is not going to be great after a period of storage. And the whole point of, you know, wanting to store it is because, you know, we have such great tasting water now. And that's going to be a negative impact too. It's not just the chemicals or the cost, but the taste of our water is going to change. I mean, think about the many places where you go where it really is undrinkable. And to go from this fabulous water to undrinkable water, when you're going to be paying these outrageous rates.
You're making me thirsty.
Yeah, I know. So enjoy it now. You know, so it's going to affect the beer industry. It's going to all these great restaurants. It's going to affect how your food tastes when you cook. It's going to impact all of those things. Now they'll say, oh, we are working with the beer industry. Well, are you working with all of us citizens? I mean, we drink it too. You know, we have it coming through our taps
so
as well.
who's the priority, the industry, or industries, the corporations, or the citizenry, the ordinary citizens?
Right. Yeah, and you know, even though they have one of the best, one of the most expensive low-income assistance programs, that's great, but it isn't going to help the middle class pay their water bills. It's been unaffordable from my perspective for at least the last 10 years. I mean, they started in 2006 raising water rates 17.8% one year, and then 8%, and on every year. So the next bill everyone gets, it will have increased 6.7% from last year. And now they're setting it up for an endless string of rate increases year after year after year.
But it creates jobs for them, doesn't it?
Well, 10 years ago, the historic average number of Water Bureau employees was about 425. And we had made so many complaints about all of these cozy consultants and the amount of money that was being spent to them. Instead of cutting back on what they gave to revolving door consultants, Randy Leonard suggested, oh, well, we'll hire more employees and we'll cut back on the spending, you know, to these consultants and engineers. Well, they hired more Water Bureau employees. They increased the numbers up to about 600, but then they doubled the amount that they gave to the engineering firms and the consultants. So it really didn't help anything. Yes, you know, they've created more, you know, jobs for Water Bureau employees, and there will be construction jobs for building this chemical adding filtration plant, but it's all unnecessary. And there wasn't even any consideration, there was no discussion at this council hearing of alternative compliance. For example, New York, their New York Water Department, they have a massive open reservoir. And one of the requirements of this federal regulation, it was inserted with no scientific evidence. They required that open reservoirs be treated, additionally treated or covered for this crypto problem, but they've never done any scientific study that there's ever been any cryptosporidium in open reservoirs. But nonetheless, New York City has been fighting this all along. Now, they've detected harmless crypto in their open reservoir, yet Senator Schumer and the American Water Works Association Research Foundation has consistently come to their service arguing their case, saying, why should they have to spend, in their case, $1 billion for a problem that doesn't exist? Well, here Portland wants to do it. The Portland Water Bureau wanted to do it. So, you know, we're proceeding down this path, spending millions. We've already spent $440 million to eliminate open reservoirs that they had just upgraded.
This is just for studies.
No, it wasn't for studies. They are demolishing the open reservoirs in Washington Park. They're already demolished. And they're burying a tiny little tank there. It's costing $190 million. It's an unheard of cost for the size of tank that they're building. Unheard of, industry-wide.
Okay, help me out here. There's a tank in Washington Park, which is in the metropolitan Portland area, and that's involved somehow in the system for Bull Run water.
Yes.
And why are they doing that?
Well, they're doing it based on this federal regulation that they helped craft. The Water Bureau and this revolving door consultant were involved in crafting this cryptosporidium. It's called the Long-Term 2 Enhanced Surface Water Rule. It's a lengthy name. And they inserted in this rule a provision related to open reservoirs, even though that has nothing
What
to
is
do.
the tank supposedly doing?
Well, there were 2 open reservoirs at Washington Park, just as there are open reservoirs, or were, at Mount Tabor, and they were providing water.
The water, Bull Run, then
Bull
Mount
Run
Tabor,
water.
and then downhill to the reservoirs in Washington
That's
Park.
right, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and so there were two open reservoirs there, and combined they were about 30 million gallons of water. Well, they hadn't been used for 3 or 4 years, so it demonstrated that we really don't need that water. You know, we really didn't need that storage, but these are fun projects. So they, based on this federal regulation, said, okay, we're not going to just put covers on them. We're not going to fight this. We're going to bury underground tanks. So they're cutting the storage in half there because water demand has gone down, but they're spending $190 million to build this tiny tank, it was less than 15 million gallons. It truly is unheard of. When I talk to other utilities across the country, for example, in Rochester, New York, they are spending 5% of what the Portland Water Bureau is spending to comply with this open reservoir requirement, 5%.
So is that tank needed?
It really isn't, because, as I said, they've already gone about 3 or 4 years without using that water there, and it's going to take them 3 or 4 more years to build the underground tank. So they're going to demonstrate for a period of 8 years that they don't need any storage there. But yet, they're demolishing 2 of the city's historic resources, most significant historic resources.
In Washington Park.
That's right, to build this tiny tank that's not needed. So for just the reservoir piece of this, they've already spent $440 million. That's why water rates are going to keep going up. And now they want to spend $500 more for another problem that doesn't exist.
It's creating jobs. Can you tell when I'm being a smart ass?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. So, you know, all of the advocates, the environment, you know, the people who have worked so hard for so long to protect our water system were really just shut out of this process.
How do you get to be included in the process you're talking about?
Well, City Hall has made it clear they're not going to let people be included. That's why they made a decision. They could have set this over, and that's what everyone asked them to do, is go to the Oregon Health Authority, push this back, you know, for several months or a year, so that the whole community could be involved in making this decision. And even though they actually went to the Health Authority and asked for an extension, they made the vote final on August 2nd.
So City Council are the ones that
yes.
that decides what to do.
In the end, but you know, they of course rely on the recommendation from the Water Bureau.
So then how do you get membership in the City Council? It's a political process, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So they're elected, I believe, I'm trying to remember if it's every 2 years or 4 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, several members will be up for re-election. I believe it's either this November or next year.
Democrats, Republicans, or what?
Well, in
affiliation?
Portland, they're almost always Democrats. Almost always. It's been a long time.
See, that's why Democrats, Republicans don't make any sense to me, because in the old years, when Democrats meant liberal, progressive, those kinds of things. But nowadays it's so confusing.
Right.
That's why I like to go a little deeper and appreciate what a person's real interests are, bottom line. Not the one that they publicize. So it sounds like they're quite conservative, quotes, in pursuing their interests and getting their projects approved.
Yes, and you know, some people on City Council, like Nick Fish is currently the Water Bureau Commissioner, and you know, it's one of those bureaus that really requires the whole council to be involved. And unfortunately, Portland, with their unique commission form of government, all of these bureaus get pretty siloed, and the other commissioners really aren't that involved in examining what these bureaus are doing. And that's a real problem.
Is there something wrong with the governing system in Portland?
Yeah, the commission form of government. And I know it's gone to the ballot many times and it fails, and that's because there are so many special interests. There are so many special interests in Portland, and everybody's pretty happy that, you know, if my special interest gets treated well through City Council, why do I want to change this project or this commission form of government? But even Steve Novick, you know, who was not reelected, after the fact, he wrote an editorial criticizing this form of government. But, you know, it's a shame. You can't just write an editorial. You have to take action if you're going to make a major change.
He was on my show years ago,
yes,
Steve Novick.
Yes.
And he's kind of, I'm not sure which side he comes down on, whether liberal or conservative,
well,
using the old-fashioned.
Generally, you know, they're all pretty liberal on social issues, but then again, you know, they didn't give this the time that it deserved, the attention that it deserved in making this decision. It's truly shameful.
So, and your action and your activity is involved in having the people's voices are heard in talking about this kind of issue.
Yes, we're very surprised, you know, that Mayor Wheeler would go along with this, because when he was a candidate running for mayor,
Mayor Wheeler, Mayor of Portland.
Mayor Ted Wheeler of Portland, he said that the city should have fought harder to protect our open reservoirs. You know, when he was in debates, he said that. And so now he's the mayor, and they're making this monumental change to our water system. Why aren't they fighting harder? And of course, what we would have advocated is that they, you know, follow the course that New York has taken, and you get a deferral, and then you unite with Senator Schumer, and you work with the American Water Works Association, and you work on making these changes. And so it's very disappointing to see just how readily he went along with all of this.
What happened to Wheeler? How did he go along and sort of switch? Do you have any idea?
Well, no, it's not understandable to me. I mean, they dragged out this hearing even though there was no meaningful public involvement, and his final statement was something like, you know, this is very sad. Well, it is. It's very sad, but you're making the vote here.
You're the mayor.
Yeah, you're the decision maker. And, you know, so that would be one of the actions, if anyone is listening and wondering what they could possibly do, is, you know, give them a call, send them a letter and say, you need to revisit this. This is not a good process. A few years ago, I also, you know, as a part of being an activist to protect our water system, worked to create an alternative management of the Water Bureau, an independent utility board similar to that in Eugene. And it failed in Portland because all of those who profit, you know, from the current system fought against that utility board. But now I've lost my key thought here.
That happens to me a lot.
Oh, it does.
You get to be my age, sweetheart. You've got something to look forward to.
But so in response to this this initiative, you know, that did get on the ballot to create an independent utility board, City Council said, oh, well, we'll put together a panel of people that will look out for the ratepayers. Well, I've been doing this, as I said, for 16 years. I've gone to these similar boards. They're called Portland Utility. It used to be Portland Utility Review Board. Now it's just Portland Utility Board. I've gone to them for 16 years. There have been, you know, at least 7 or 8 different boards. This new board that they put together, well, it's really not much different than the old boards, even though they've complained to City Hall that most of the time the Water Bureau brings them projects when the decisions are already made. Mm-hmm. So what impact can they have? So even though they complained to City Council about that, they essentially were used in this process. They argued with the Water Bureau about there not being any public involvement process. They argued about, you know, all the decisions being fait accompli by the time they're brought to them. And then they just, under pressure from Commissioner Nick Fish, who said, look, we don't want you discussing the species of Cryptosporidium. That's splitting hairs. Well, how can that be splitting hairs? That's the essential point. Yeah, and he pressured them. He said, you just make your best guess. He said that twice in a meeting to them. Make your best guess.
We're not interested in guesses at this point.
Exactly. And they went along. They went along with that. Well, but you have to look at the composition of this panel. There are 3 Water Bureau employees on the panel. There's a Bureau of Environmental Services. There's a representative from PGE. And you may have heard there's recently been a bad deal on that with the Water Bureau. And there's really only been 1 or 2 people that have advocated, you know, for the general public and for the ratepayer serving on this panel.
Doesn't sound very promising.
No, and
when are you going to see some success in your adventure or your efforts? What kind of success you're looking for? Get the system to abandon this goofy plan or approach?
Well, absolutely.
Leave things alone?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, back in 2004, when we were able to push for, you know, a 3-month panel, we were successful then, but it was short-lived. We were successful for 10 years, and then they keep coming back. I mean, obviously, corporations are much more powerful than, you know, individuals. Activists.
Revolution, that's the answer. Take to the streets. For me, there's always something to do. I remember in my lifetime some things that seemed totally unresolvable, and when we took to the streets, they were resolved, from civil rights in the back of the bus in Vietnam, and even women's suffrage and recent attempts to have women be treated equally in the workplace as far as treatment and compensation. So there's always challenges that we can be successful if we find some ways to overcome the existing resistance.
Right. And now, unfortunately, even though they've made this decision, now you're going to see a big propaganda campaign. So the Water Bureau avoided a meaningful public process during the decision period, but now they're going to start putting out all sorts of propaganda about this filtration plant. And you won't hear them talking about the differences between Cryptosporidium species. I mean, even the Multnomah County public health officer, he was pretty quiet early on, and then when he finally had to testify at council, he said, well, this is awkward to tell you that during the period the Water Bureau had their DTECs in March, February and March, the actual incidence in the community of disease went down. Because generally there's some disease from Cryptosporidium from daycare centers and public swimming pools. That's where you're going to find infectious species of Cryptosporidium. So there's usually some minor level in the community from those 2 sources, but during the time they had their DTECs, the level of disease in the community went down. But why would he say this was awkward to say that? It shouldn't be awkward. You should have been shouting it. You should have written, you know, letters to the editor, an opinion piece. You know, like the Oregonian misstated, they said that these were toxic species of crypto. Well, that's absolutely false. And yet the Water Bureau was silent about that. You know, and a responsible utility agency who likes to say, we're really a public health agency, well, then why aren't you putting out accurate information?
To do with public health and not for profit.
Yes, yes.
So you have had a long time involved in this situation. It's been quite satisfying for you in that you have, I'm guessing, and that you've occupied your time and your energies pursuing a goal that's worthy for human beings. And what would happen if you not have this kind of an effort that you've been involved with for so many years? What would you do with your time?
Well, I mean, to me, this is an environmental issue. This is a public health issue. Water is essential to life. I mean, I am really so grateful to have met the wonderful people, the colleagues, you know, who came before us. I mean, I've been doing this for 16 years, but the people that I got to meet that had been working on these issues for 30 years, 40 years, I mean, you know, like Dr. Joseph Miller, who's passed away now, and Regna Merritt, all those folks, and Dr. Larson, they were up there in Bull Run when the Water Bureau was complicit in the Forest Service illegal logging in Bull Run. So in the 70s and the 90s, they stopped all that illegal logging up in Bull Run. So I would have missed out on meeting all of these wonderful people, you know, who've made my life rich through all of these years. And
yes.
And of course, you know, the benefit would have been I wouldn't have known about all these massive controversies with the Water Bureau without all of these years of hard-fought public records requests, because I found consistently over 16 years it's not been the information the Water Bureau's handed us that's been most important. It's been the information they've withheld. And it's only through these hard-fought public records requests, you know, have we come to learn about all of these relationships with the corporation, all of these contracts, all of the misinformation that's been put out there.
We're going to send you to Washington because we need to do something about those clowns, and I shouldn't say that, those individuals who are running our federal government even. So time has run out for us just about. So we're going to need to stop before my director yells at me again, as he usually does when I go too long. And let's have a few public service announcements that I'd like to put on toward the end of my show. But before that, let's have you say something to the viewers. Look at that camera over there and tell them in the final minutes that we have, take a minute or two to talk about what you want to tell them about anything at all.
Well, I would ask that any of you who are concerned about protecting our fabulous, pristine watershed and our great Bull Run water, that you do contact City Hall. Contact Mayor Ted Wheeler and ask him to hold a meaningful public process and revisit this decision. And ask that he listen to the public. Thank you.
All right, very good. Now, a few public service announcements. Can we do that, please? All right, because I have my own axe that I like to grind here about the ACLU. This is my favorite, the American Civil Liberties Union. I've been a member now for only for about 40 years. I love the ACLU. Go to that website, www.aclu.org, and learn how to end corporate personhood. Go to movetoamend.org. And thanks for watching. And please remember KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, be charitable to you too. And you too, Floyd. You too. Don't look at me. See you next time. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.